Tonight we're going to take a look at a slice of life between the past, present, and future of 3 independent game creators. It's going to be a documentary this week, but we're covering Indie Game the Movie this week on Video Game Movie Anatomy.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movie. And now, here's Popcorn Talk's Video Game Movie Anatomy.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a inspirational, hopefully not wanting to kill yourself episode of Video Game Movie Anatomy. Tonight we're trying something a little bit different. We are doing a documentary. We're doing Indie Game the Movie, back from 2012. I love this movie. I'm so happy to get a chance to go back and look at it. But I'm not doing it alone. I'm here with series regular. You came off of a big week at Long Beach Comic Con, so that's why we had to delay this episode. But I'm here with Stacey Shuttleworth.
Yes, I'm Stacey Shuttleworth. You can find me online on Twitter at Stacey Shuttles, or online on Twitter and all over the web at Nerds Doing Stuff, where I'm a nerd doing stuff.
And selling stuff.
And selling stuff now.
How did it go?
It was wonderful. It was really fun. I sold at Long Beach Comic Con for the first time. I had my own little table and everything, and it was very exciting.
It looked like you had a lot of fun?
It was a really interesting experience. Really weird being behind a booth, other than like walking around and being part of the convention, but...
Being still amongst the madness. You can let us know what it's like manning a booth once we talk a little bit more about Phil Fish and his experience with Fez. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with Indie Game the Movie, this is a documentary made in 2012 that follows the journeys of indie game developers as they create games and release those works and themselves to the world. The 3 games that they covered were Jonathan Blow's Braid, which had been out and sort of the linchpin, the benchmark, if you will, of indie game releases. Phil Fish, who was developing the yet-to-be-released Fez from highly critical acclaim, and Edmund McMillen and Tommy Refenes, I'm sorry if I got that name wrong, but Team Meat, who released Super Meat Boy. You got to be with them the day that Super Meat Boy was released. And initial thoughts on the documentary?
I really enjoyed it overall. I really liked the way it was shot for the most part. And it was really interesting. I love kind of that humanizing behind these. I mean, we get so much stuff to consume, and so, I mean, whether it's a product or a game or a movie, so it's really nice to kind of go behind that and look at the people who were back there doing this. And
especially for projects as quirky as all of these, like Jonathan Blow, they mentioned it in the documentary, had a very direct relationship to all of the critics and commenters. Yes. So you thought you knew what Jonathan Blow was like, and you got to get a little bit more of a glimpse into why, and it made sense as to why he was responding the way he did. I love this movie. I remember seeing it come across my Steam dashboard back in 2013, and it came and went, and I only watched this maybe 2 years ago. So in 2014, a couple of years after it had come out, it had been on the top of my Netflix queue for years, and I'm happy that it stayed there because
I got one of those too. Several.
The thing about this one's going to be a little bit different. We're still going to do some of our favorite segments, some of our favorite games that we have with our regular movies. But, I mean, it's in a different light because we're dealing with real people. So hopefully it doesn't hit home. But let's try. We're going to start with our speed run, which is a definitive review of the film. It's short, it's quick, it's to the point. It'll make you want to buy the movie, or rent it from Blockbuster, or leave it in its package right there on the shelf. So... what do you have for a speed run of Indie Game the Movie?
Okay, so Indie Game the Movie is a breathtaking, well-composed exploration of independent developers, brimming with passion and a manic energy required to successfully navigate this challenging lifestyle. Words.
That was good. No, that's fine. That's fine. Indie Game the Movie will inspire people who never wanted to make games, and if you never wanted to make games, this will probably keep you from doing it at the same time. It's a very dividing piece. It's very dividing. It shows you the rigors, the mental stresses that we saw from very, very dramatic Phil Fish throughout all of this.
Amped it up to 11.
And Ed and Tommy as well, seeing their relationship and with their family and with their loved ones, and Jonathan Blow was there too. But yeah, this is one that I think any documentary fans should watch, as well as any if you have played Braid, if you have played Super Meat Boy, if you have played Fez, any behind the scenes look, people look for them, and to have a look like this that's made so artistically is required viewing at this point.
Absolutely.
Did you have a controller toss moment?
So the only thing that came close to a controller toss moment for me was in the very beginning. They started, and you get the little caption that it's release day. And so you go through a little bit of that, and then it goes present day, and you jump back in time. And I thought that was a really weird choice that didn't really work. It can't be present day. I mean, it could be your starting point, but we know it's not present day anymore. I don't know.
I think
things.
It's because if it just started with, hey, we're making a game, then if for people like us who are in it to see how these games are made and see the people behind them, like, we don't necessarily need that hook. But for people who are just in to watch a documentary, that could be something to be like, oh, conflict, what does that mean? How did they get there? What's going to happen?
Okay, I have no problem with the way they chose to set it up, just the wording.
Just the actual wording?
Just the wording. It's the present day. Well, it's not the present day.
Yeah. It's so something like X days until release day.
Something like that. I feel like
that
would have made a little more consistency. I don't know. You can't really go to the present when it's clearly the past. I don't know.
No, that makes sense. It's the present day of when we started shooting. Yeah, I can see that. Mine was Phil Fish in general.
God. All over the place.
He had a lot of issues at this time in his life, so it's not anything personally against the man, but there were times where it was like, this is really dramatic and it doesn't seem quite real.
No, he would swing from being very charming and very real and then just drama, and it was like, okay, well, where are you coming from here?
It was a little too unstable, you know?
Yeah, it was all over.
Like when he was at PAX talking and the game stopped working, he was like, it's a game-breaking bug. We're screwed. We're done. We're dead.
Panicking.
It's like, man,
okay.
I know this. You've been working on this for quite some time, and you got the stress of the guy who may or may not sign. But you're here. People are going to play your game.
People are standing here watching you do this.
Yeah. And that's another thing, is it's not just, it's like, oh, hold on. This is rare. We'll take care of it. Hold on. Just give me a second. And that's less important, you know. And you know what else was the freaking out about the Facebook likes on the trailer.
Oh yeah, that was weird. They focused on that really heavily.
It had like 213 tweets and like
11,000
shares on Facebook. It's like I know that's big and it's gotten better now, but at the same time, and then him going, yeah, it was a glitch. It was actually 0. First of all, I don't believe that. I think the glitch was the 0 as opposed to 11,000, and him just going like, yeah, it was really invigorating, and then to get that all taken away from me, I'm just
like, it was this horrible, like the worst thing that happened that entire day.
It just sucked all the air out of me. That crazy Quebecois. So we don't necessarily follow anybody else than these 3 studios. How many of these 3 games have you played?
So when the whole Fez thing happened, I stepped away and said, I'm not playing that.
Really?
I did. You know what? That was the one that I was kind of interested in playing, and then it kind of turned into just this big old mess, and I was like, all right. And then it just kind of went by the wayside, and I never got around to it. I never played Super Meat Boy either. That one I kind of missed. It looks amazing, and I really like Edmund McMillen. I've played The Binding of Isaac, which I love. That's a great game.
I want to talk about a depressing game.
Oh,
that's
it's super depressing,
game.
But it's really cool. So that one I don't know how I just completely missed. So I'm probably going to go back. I'm going to go back and revisit that one.
Super Meat Boy was on Wii U, 360, Xbox One. They recently brought it back to PS3, PS4, PC, everywhere.
Yeah, I'm going to go pick up that one.
That was
real good.
Getting that on Steam was the reason why I had to get a controller, because I could not play that on keys. I needed the response time of a controller, and seeing them develop it with a controller made me go, this is not for PC. This is for Xbox. This is for PlayStation. What about Braid?
Braid, I never personally, had my fingers on the keyboard playing it. I watched a lot of playthrough of that though.
I
Because
have
it was beautiful.
minimal experience with all. Well, not minimal, but I have experience with all three of these games, and it's interesting how after I first watched Indie Game the movie, I didn't want to play Fez anymore because of how I saw Phil Fish react to everything and create this stuff, and it made me really sad because a little dude in a Fez
Super cute.
is super cute, and seeing all of the textures being Tetris blocks,
Really cool.
Adorable.
It's wonderful. Yeah, see, because I hadn't watched the movie at the point of the meltdown, and just I was really detached from the indie world at that point in my life, but I still saw it all happening on Twitter and heard about it. I mean, it was all anyone was talking about for days, and so I'd see everything that was going on, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'm
don't want to deal with this.
I don't want to go into this world. I'm not going there.
Fez, and I would say at this point I'm probably going to go back to it because it seeing this from a different perspective and different eyes made me. I enjoyed Fez. I really did. It is exactly as he said. He wanted to make a love letter to gaming, and this was a story about gaming without actually being a story, because one of the things that he mentioned specifically was the people who would be on Twitter or Facebook, or people who would text me saying, hey, did you reach this room in Fez? If you like there's a QR code. If you take a picture of the QR code, it'll send you to a page where you put in a code and you get a piece of the puzzle. Just like, that's amazing.
Fantastic. Yeah, the documentary actually made me way more open to going back and playing Fez.
And I would recommend it. But I would say first things first, though, Super Meat Boy. Like, I never, anytime I go back to it, I never get too far, but it's always just, the game, it feels so good.
All right.
It's more responsive than Mario.
Incredible.
It's more,
so controller?
You could definitely controller. I have a wired Xbox if you want to borrow. Or just get it on a console. And Braid, I was amongst that crowd of like, what is this?
Beautiful.
Exactly. It was a beautiful game, beautiful soundtrack, art style, and it's like, oh, it's a puzzle, and he's trying to save this princess, but it's like Mario. Is this a Mario allegory? What is this supposed to be? And all of that unraveling, like I get why he was so possessive of it.
Yeah, I absolutely get that. I feel like if I was inclined to develop video games, I'd probably have a very similar reaction, a very personal, that's a very personal thing. And I think especially for him it was. So.
And it's interesting how, I don't know how the selection process worked with James Swirsky and Lisanne Pajot, who directed the film. Braid, I can understand why. Why did they pick Super Meat Boy, and Fez, I can see them picking because of all of the awards that are run before even
it
release.
Had a history.
Yeah. So let's see where this is going. But it's so interesting that this is a seminal movie that everybody needs to see, and these three games play an important part in indie gaming, modern indie gaming, and gaming in general, and how important all of these became. What was your favorite storyline thread to follow?
Super Meat Boy.
Yeah.
I thought that, those developers were really kind of endearing in a way, and their storyline was a little more positive in some ways. There was still a lot of the freaking out and the same kind of panicking pressure, but there was a lot of humanity in there too. And that game looks fantastic.
It's oh god,
I'm ready to play it.
So like it's been mentioned and like I've seen in reviews past, it's so punishing, but it's nobody's fault but your own. The controls are so tight and so well programmed that if you make a mistake, it's like, damn it, I need to get that right.
So I'm gonna make it like through half of the first level, and 3 weeks later I'll still be on the first half of the first level.
Man.
But
the first world is designed to get you used to.
Well,
and
that's what they talk. They touch on that
They touch on what
what
the purpose of, and I think the advantage of indie games versus big studio games is instead of people going, "This is how you do something," they just put it in front of you and say, "Figure it out, idiot." And Super Meat Boy is one of the ones where you gotta figure it out, idiot. And they help by there's some, and we're talking a little bit more about the game than the documentary, but they include some guest characters from other games that have different power-ups. So like Commander Video from the Bit Trip Runner series has a ability where he can just kind of float like Princess Peach in Super Mario 2, and that's so helpful. And it's like, oh dude, I gotta be Commander Video for this one. But it's still the same, go up the wall a bit, jump off, and yeah. See that and that's part of the reason why I like this movie so much, is it makes me excited about what people can create. And without these games, and I would say especially without Braid, we wouldn't have one of my favorite games of all time, which is Journey. And we'll talk a little bit more about what movies we would want to see, what sort of make this a little bit more like our regular show. What about the other storylines? I personally wanted to see more from Jonathan Blow.
Yeah, he kind of dropped off about halfway through.
They used him. It seems like they used him as a linchpin to go, well, look at how cool Braid did.
Right. It was kind of the setup, and then you went into the up and coming developers, I guess. So yeah, I think there was a lot more to be said about him, and I know he's gone on and said a lot more about Braid. And
the whole reason we picked Indie Game the Movie was Patrick's idea, who you can follow at P to the Dees, who is unfortunately not joining us tonight, but will join us next week when we're going to talk about this a little bit more in a different way. But because The Witness is coming out, which is another puzzle platformer not platformer, but another puzzle game from Jonathan Blow, is out on consoles now. It's on Xbox finally. It was a PS4 exclusive for quite some time, so make sure you pick up The Witness. But Jonathan Blow has always been this sort of character in the gaming world that I think fit the mold of what we saw him in this movie.
Yes.
But it was that made me go, well, why can't we just have Indie Game the Movie, Jonathan Blow, Indie Game the Movie, Phil Fish, Indie Game the Movie, Team Meat? Like,
they could absolutely,
they go back to it and have a little bit more. Braid being so unique and new and different, and yet being polished and having all of the things that a regular big budget game has, except for certain levels of hype. I'm just very surprised that they kept it so short, because the movie is only like 94 minutes, and it goes by fast.
It does.
Super fast. And I could have been in that world for an extra half hour.
Easily.
Why not?
It was fun. I think, overall there were a few slow pacing moments, but overall it was really interesting what they had to say, and watching the process.
Because we saw the struggle in Super Meat Boy, in the creation of Super Meat Boy, and in the creation of Fez, and just Phil Fish in general. But we didn't really see that for Jonathan Blow and Braid. And I know this was all after the fact, but I think if they could have had him speak a little bit more on what that influence was. Like, people are going to look back to Braid and go, that's why I started making games. And we got that in this too. If we sell 20,000, then that's better. That's the same, if not better, double than what Braid did. And that being the linchpin.
The benchmark. Braid was the benchmark.
Oh, that game. That soundtrack, I wouldn't say blaring, but I was listening to. I love that soundtrack anytime you get a fiddle in it. So we're going to talk a little bit about the directors, Lisanne Pajot and James Swirsky. This is kind of their only big project. They're consultants for documentary filmmaking. This was made out of a Kickstarter campaign, and they've spoken at a lot of events: Sundance, the Westdock Conference, XOXO Conference, the Vancouver International Film Festival, or VIFF, if you will, South by Southwest Game Developers Conference, and they ran the company that distributed the movie, which was Blinkworks, and they kind of have been around video games their entire lives, so capturing this side of the world, I think that's why when Tim Schafer did his Kickstarter for I forgot the name of the game, but the adventure game that came out of that Kickstarter, that I think the most they kept it low, but people wanted to see the making of it. Man, I want to save this for next week when we have Patrick in. But there's so many games that if we could see the people behind it, not just the director, not just the Ken Levines, not just the Cliff Blazinskis, but if we could see the entire team in it, I think you could get people a little bit more invested in the project. So they're like, oh, I want Dave to have a win. I want the the field tester. I want him to have a day and feed his kids. What did you think about the perspective of this whole thing? Like, what insights did this give you into indie game creation?
I mean, I guess I never really stopped to consider how much of a solo project a lot of these things are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, figured small teams, a couple of people, but these, I mean, it really showcased how this is one, maybe two people really doing everything and taking on the brunt of the work. And I mean, the scope of that is just pretty incredible.
And these are the success stories. Like,
Right.
imagine the ones that are these people, these same people that put everything into it, and that's it. They make it. Nothing really happens. You see it on a Steam sale for 30 cents. Maybe I'll get it. Maybe I won't. It doesn't have great reviews.
Steam is unforgiving too.
I'm kind of interested in that story as well. And we're gonna talk about it next week. But there was sort of a supplemental sequel called Indie Game Life After that we're gonna talk about next week when we get back on our regular schedule. But we're gonna talk about more about other games that they featured on that, like Spelunky, which I'm surprised didn't make it into the original cut, and some of the asset creation on Braid as well.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely more to explore.
What was there anything? What was one of your favorite methods that they like? You mentioned that you like the style. What was it about the style that drew you into this?
As far as the filming, how it was shot, I just think it was really artistic. As far as a lot of the shots, some of them were a little corny, but just they did a really good job, I guess, of kind of showcasing in a lot of the wider shots just how isolating some of the developers felt, and I thought that was really effective.
Like huge room, but their back is to everything, and they're just stuck
sitting in a
corner.
little chair, and everything's dark and shadow. It just had some interesting shots like that I thought were really effective.
I like it. It looked super professional, and
It really did.
It was a tiny budget. And we're not moving past some production stuff, but it had $100,000 Canadian dollar budget, which translates to, at least modern today, $75,000. Which I mean, that's nothing. That's pennies. That's pittance. But to get the reaction that they got, and not to have a major release, but it still has such a huge foothold on the entire industry, giving it away for free. It's been on Netflix forever.
Right.
It's
there to watch.
It's there to watch, and it's all about the story to these folks, and I absolutely loved it. They directed, produced, shot, edited the entire thing, and they have Jim Guthrie to thank for the score, which felt like a combination of Braid and Fez, because Super Meat Boy is completely, it's just
right. No, you don't go there.
Super Meat Boy, completely different type of world. But it ended up being an indie darling, like all of these games were. And I would like to see them experiment more and keep like touching back and make Indie Game the Movie 2, Indie Game the Movie 3, or whatever, just so that we can get a linchpin so that Super Meat Boy is the one that is considered the benchmark, and then we've got another game that's about to start. Even though like indie studios these days, while there are a lot of the 2 people, 1 person, 2 person, 5 person teams,
right,
like it's gotten to the point where it's like a 20 person team, 30 person team, and it's a little bit more.
It has expanded exponentially in the past couple of years alone. So we have a lot of things that are still indie, but it's not this kind of one person working from home type.
Yeah, it's an
experience.
Indie style.
Right.
So we want an indie style studio like Sony Santa Monica that did Journey, or that game company that turned into Sony Santa Monica that did Journey. You know, their art director went and made Abzu, which came out earlier this year, which is essentially Journey underwater. But I would still recommend playing it because I liked that better than Inside on the whole, and people are giving Inside so and Patrick would kill me if he was here and he heard me say that. But
you're saying it, isn't it?
It's I would suggest it though. You got a PS4, you pick up Abzu. I'm talking to you directly. I'm not talking to the folks. I'm talking to you at Stacey Shuttles. Pick up. Journey is free right now on the PlayStation Network.
Fantastic.
So pick that up.
I have free time now, so I can play games again.
Yeah, you don't have to
really
hustle
excited.
and make jewelry.
Really excited.
Dang it! No, we have to talk about that next week because it was in Life After.
Okay.
But there's a very funny metaphor that one of the fellas from Team Meat brought up about modern gaming, and he made an independent game to sort of comment on it, and it's like, that was me last month. Crap. Oh, the summer games. Anyway, so screw it. Why not? Let's get into some critical reception. This didn't really have a major release. It wasn't. They toured it around in theaters, but it was mostly digital and mostly the festival circuit. And this is the highest rating I think we will ever see.
I was shocked.
I'm also shocked that the critic score is higher than the audience score.
Yes.
93% score for the critics for Rotten Tomatoes and 91% for audience, and it has a 7.7 out of 10 at IMDb. Crazy. Wild.
Amazing.
It's and so I had to really look to find a negative review, and I just think it's a bad review. So let's start with that one, and we'll end with happy. Jeremy Heilman at moviemartyr.com said, the film becomes a cheerleader for its subjects, which limits its ability to understand them. Which I don't necessarily agree with.
No, I really don't think so. It doesn't and it's not like they take their subjects and take away all the bad and just show them as these glowing, wonderful individuals.
Phil Fish.
For example.
But I also don't think that the wording is so limiting, like for online release, indie game, Xbox Live Arcade, Summer of Arcade, whatever. I don't think the language is so like video game insider that it limits people's understanding.
No, I don't think so either. I think it's a very broad kind of approach. I mean, even people who really aren't into gaming could totally pick this up. Like, as a documentary fan, could pick it up and learn something new that would mean something.
This is an important tool for game makers and filmmakers and film fans and game fans.
I think and I think it even could go even a little more universally than that, too. Just that struggle of working so hard to achieve something.
Life's goal, and to speak to exactly what you just said, Linda Barnard from the Toronto Star says, you may have never picked up a game console in your life, but there's universal access thanks to compelling stories in Indie Game the Movie. And I agree. One that I think Patrick would be appreciative of, Soren Anderson says, they're works of art, they're windows onto the psychology. I'm going to take that again. Take two. Soren Anderson from the Seattle Times says, they're works of art, they're windows onto the psychology of their creators, their video games. Beautiful. Too true.
Yeah, that's perfectly phrased.
Yeah, that along with Linda's is I think the best way to take it. And this one, a lot of awards. It won the World Cinema Documentary Editing Award at the 2012 Sundance Film Festival. It was also named Best Documentary at the Utah Film Critics Association and nominated for the Canadian Screen Awards at the first Canadian Screen Awards in Best Feature-Length Documentary. So it's garnered a lot of attention from fans, from viewers, from game fans, but it also made some strides. Like getting Best Editing at Sundance is crazy.
It's pretty huge.
Best crazy. Best possible crazy. Any final thoughts on the story that they were trying to tell? I know it's hard not to go into the epilogue, which we will talk about more next week. Right. So we're kind of doing a two-parter, just so that we can get Patrick in to touch on the stories a little bit more as well. He is an insanely busy man, but I value his opinion, and I want to make sure that it can be shared.
Will be a good time next week.
What?
I mean, I think it was pretty cohesive throughout the way they set it up. And as much as I would have liked to see more of Braid, I did kind of like the way that was set up as all right, this is what we have, and then this is what they're working towards. And overall, I think the editing was really good. There were a couple of times where you had to reorient yourself pretty quickly, but the setup shots, like the locations that they would show you, made it pretty easy. So it was
the establishing shots were super cinematic, and it was the same for the convention center for PAX as it was for like Edmund's room. Right. So it was the same sort of like short tracking, just barely moving, but playing with the focus and the feature of the shot.
And it put you back where it put you back in the mindset of whichever storyline we were following.
What was your favorite Phil Fish hairstyle or facial hairstyle?
Oh God, I know.
Do you like the chops? Chops had to go.
They were great in a horrible, horrible way. I mean, you just stared at it. What are you thinking?
And as much
You're
as
making this beautiful game. What are you thinking?
And as much as everybody gives Phil Fish crap, I don't necessarily think he deserves it. He kind of dug his own. I don't want to say dug his own grave, but he's essentially kind of making the bed that he has to sleep in. Mm-hmm. So there are a couple of instances where it's like, just what if you just do that? And he's like, no, I'm making my game. It's my art. It's my vision, like any cocky artist would. So
right.
I think I'm kind of jokingly messing around with Phil Fish, but I respect the fact that he stayed so true to the vision that he wanted. But there is a time when you've got to let it go.
You got to be able to bend a little bit.
Like he was talking to Tycho at PAX, like this is essentially Fez 4. Like he rebuilt the game from the ground up 4 times, and as much as he vilifies his ex-partner, sometimes you're like, oh, I know why he left, because this dude's a flippin' loon. And I don't mean the currency because he's from Canada. I mean loon the bird. This is a dumb joke. But yeah, like he came off very possessive, and he was like, if I see him, I don't know, I might murder him, I might kill him, I might strangle him. It was like,
he was very violent a few times. Several times. Like okay.
So favorite line. One of my favorite lines, and this isn't a joke, but it kind of presented the seriousness of the situation and how important this type of work is to people. Mm-hmm. What are you going to do if you can't finish the game? Kill myself. Instantly. That means he's thought about it.
Okay, but then he thought about it again and reiterated it.
Yeah.
Which was like...
Which is worse.
Yeah.
Like this, that's where it sort of dives from this misguided self-righteous artist into troubled man who needs help, and this is the only guiding light in his life.
Yeah, that was one of the worst kind of, and a couple of them were very flippant about that idea. Mm-hmm. Like, oh well, I'll kill myself. Okay.
It seemed to come off too naturally.
It was really easily thrown around a couple of times.
Like which member of Team Meat was it?
Oh, it was
it Tommy?
Tommy, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Just like, whatever.
Yeah, like it was nothing.
I'm just gonna kill myself, whatever. I'm just living with my parents. I got my cats here.
Yeah.
It's very, very bizarre, very interesting. Did you have a favorite line?
I did. More because it personally resonated with me a little bit.
It wasn't the killing yourself, was it?
No, it was definitely not that one.
Good.
No. It was Edward McMillen talking about why he's doing this. And so it's, my whole career has been me trying to find new ways to communicate with people because I desperately want to communicate with people, but I don't want the messy interaction of having to make friends and talk to people because I probably don't like them.
Yeah. That's pretty...
Yeah.
Like it's him with Edmund and Phil. They both kind of had a similar way of video games and art helped me express myself.
Right.
But Ed had a better attitude about it.
He had a much better attitude about it.
Uh-huh.
Just overall, he was a much more enjoyable human being. And I don't think they presented Phil Fish in a terrible light in the documentary at all.
I think he presented himself in a light that he may not have known was being shown. Mm-hmm. And I think he may have given them... He's been on record saying that he loved the movie. So... And that nailed his, like, what he was feeling at the time. But I don't know, dude.
Yeah. I mean, there were several parts where I was like, okay, this doesn't seem like the Phil Fish that I, had thought he was. Like, the picture that was painted from his previous meltdowns and that, that whole big controversy. So there were a couple moments where, like, all right, he's fine. He's just stressed or whatever. But I think, Edmund overall was just a little more jovial, a little more...
He was definitely more jovial, and I could relate to him a lot more. And in having that expression, and he's made several games over the years, all Flash, all Flash and no sizzle. That's not true.
No.
And next week when we talk about indie game Life After, that went into much more detail on what each specific project meant. There's one that he dedicated to his niece that was just adorable, and then he goes from that and makes a game about a monster vagina. Just to see that he could.
Why not?
But I mean, and talking about his story a little bit more, hearing that just because he drew monsters as a kid instead of like happy things, they're like, yeah they wanted to psychologically evaluate me.
That was super interesting. Just kind of those misconceptions that people can jump to.
Like art isn't all flowers, and sometimes it's a boy with no skin who wants to save a bandage girl from the evil Dr. Fetus. I still want to see that movie. And let's get Zach Galifianakis or Chris Pratt as Meat Boy.
Well,
Jared Leto as evil Dr. Fetus or Bandage Girl, whatever.
Taking interesting turns. All right, let's go.
So, actually, speaking of which, that's the gimmick we're doing. So instead of recasting, because this was a documentary, you can't recast people. I mean, you could. That'd be weird. I'd recast Phil Fish. That's not true. This week, we're going to talk about which of these 3 games do we want to see a film adaptation of. And again, that's if you weren't paying attention or you're just joining us for the first time, we're doing Indie Game the Movie. So, Fez, Braid, Super Meat Boy, which of these 3 do you want to see a film adaptation of?
I like the emphasis on Super Meat Boy.
Super Meat Boy!
Because I don't think your choice is obvious. No. I would totally go with Super Meat Boy. I was thinking about it and I was like, all right, this could go one of 2 ways. It could be like this crazy high-paced like action, kind of really out there and kind of silly, or it could be just something so dark and like going back to the fact that he was talking about how he was always trying to save his girlfriend because he literally needed her, and like talking about how he's got no skin, he's probably in horrible pain all the time,
but he just keeps going.
But he just goes. It could be this like twisted thing.
I mean, that's also beautiful.
Oh, I would watch either.
You make me whole, you make me complete, and you make me not hurt.
Yeah,
like it's a physical manifestation of an emotional struggle.
It's a very extreme metaphor. I mean, I like it.
It's great. Like they for a game that story seems so silly when you think about it. You're just like, this guy's scraping up walls and like pitter pattering across, trying to escape from this evil Dr. Fetus. I would want to see what they do with it, but they would have to be directly involved because if they gave it to an independent animation studio to make something, I think that would be the closest it could be to fulfilling its potential. And I mean, after we reviewed Angry Birds earlier in the summer, and it was like, how do you take something so simple, so basic, no dialogue, no nothing, and turn it into a movie? And they did. They turned it into a movie.
They made it happen.
A great movie.
A really enjoyable one.
Which, if you still have a question whether or not you should see that movie, why don't you go back and watch our episode from June where we covered Angry Birds here on Video Game Movie Anatomy. And as much as I love Super Meat Boy, and I really love Super Meat Boy, I think a Braid film which goes against the hero's journey sort of stigma that films have, where it's like, oh, it's got to be the hero, it's got to be this, it's got to be that. If you haven't played Braid, there comes a point where you realize it's a different type, and I don't even want to spoil it. It's been 8 years that this game's been out, and if you haven't played it, you need to go play it. But there comes a point in the game where everything starts to turn a little bit, and everything changes, and the perspective that you thought you were seeing it from is completely different than what's expected, because, oh, I'm a video game protagonist, there's a dinosaur here who's telling me that the princess is in another castle. And then that explanation starts to get a little bit longer. You start to piece together parts of your past and what exactly you're doing in order, why you're saving this princess, why you're saving your girlfriend. I almost said something else that would have spoiled a little bit more, but yeah. So I think playing with that dynamic and shifting the paradigm. It's still a short movie. It may not necessarily be. It could. I mean, we've had combination animation, live action. Right. It can be something where he goes into this world, as opposed to it all being animation or it all being live action with the weird fuzzy monsters. Yeah. It could be mostly live action, and it's still this big journey that ends up changing near the end. But I think a Braid movie would be challenging. I don't think Jonathan Blow would let it happen.
Probably not.
Unless he directly wrote it and was responsible for everything.
Oversaw everything. There's no way.
But that's what I would like to see. Let us know what you would want to see a movie adaptation of between Fez, Super Meat Boy, and Braid. Let us know in the comments down below, or let us know on Twitter using the hashtag VGMAnatomy. Final thoughts on Indie Game the movie.
I mean, again, I'll reiterate. I absolutely loved kind of seeing the behind the screen, like take on it, seeing the
code.
Seeing
the code of the Matrix.
Getting in there. Yeah, and I liked
Hacking
that it
the
was
system.
totally accessible. You know, just that idea of doing what you love and working as hard as you need to. And the fact that when you're doing that, it sucks sometimes and it's hard and you want to quit and you feel like it's going to be the end of the world if you don't succeed, and you just keep doing it and then seeing these guys have this success afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
You
And
know?
dreams do come true.
Indeed.
You just got to work toward them. It's the new Disney paradigm. We saw it with Princess and the Frog. We're seeing it again here with Indie Game the movie. What it takes to be a success these days has completely changed. But it's also, if you stick to your guns like Phil Fish and you put the work in like Team Meat, you can get success like Jonathan Blow did with Braid. And I'm going through a time right now where I feel like I'm overworked, and I probably am. But watching this made me go just a little more. Just like that, it's that just a little more that you need to continue, and I love it. And if you're watching this or listening to this and you haven't watched Indie Game the movie, we haven't super spoiled a lot of it for you. And I know that anytime we have a positive experience with the movie, it's a completely different type of show.
It really is.
And especially with a documentary where there's no necessarily through line plot. But we want to hear from you. What did Indie Game the movie teach you? What did you learn from it? What of the 3 games do you want to see a film adaptation of? Why am I so burpy? All these and more next week. But let us know in the comments down below. Let us know on Twitter. Would you want, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, this may or may not necessarily work with a documentary, but if you wanted to see, do you want to see these filmmakers go back to the well and make a new Indie Game the movie from new perspectives and new games?
I could watch a weekly serialized, series on them following different developers, whether they focused on one per week or a month or, whenever. But I could totally watch a series where they go in and kind of go behind the scenes. I like that kind of thing.
And then keep checking in with people. So you would give this an extra life.
I would give this an extra life.
That's our rating system, game over or extra life. We've kind of just been skimming over the rules. It's a little bit interesting. Sorry if this is your first episode joining us. But it's yay or nay here. Extra life or game over. You give it an extra life. I agree. Extra life. And what we're going to talk about a little bit more next week in Life After is we do get to see some other game studios. And it's not as in-depth. We don't get to know the people. We just get to know kind of the projects. But we get to know a little bit of the person and hear a couple of extra stories. But I would always be down to hear more. Like, I would like to see the story from the artist or the art director from that game studio move from Journey to Abzu and see what that whole process was like and why they're in this sort of world. Again, let us know what you think in the comments down below or on Twitter. Before we go, just wanted to mention, again, next week we are doing Indie Game Life After, also on Netflix, so make sure to watch that. It's 2 hours. It's an epilogue for all of these stories, so we're going to kind of wrap everything up with Patrick so that Patrick can share his thoughts on the entire experience as well, expand upon it. It might be a shorter episode, but we need a break from all of the garbage that Hollywood has thrown at us, especially since we're getting into horror movie season, and I don't want to watch all the rest of the Resident Evil movies, but
I'm really excited for these terrible horror movies. I live for them sometimes.
So we're going to do...
especially in October.
So, actually, maybe I'll put out a poll whether we do Blood Rain, Silent Hill, House of the Dead,
Oh yeah.
or the next Resident Evil.
Maybe we can push that one back a little.
We gotta watch them all before the new one
I
comes.
know.
Before the last one comes
we
out.
still have some time.
It's weird that it's coming out in the spring. That's really bizarre.
Seems unfitting.
I mean, it's an action movie. It's not a Halloween movie. It's an action movie.
I guess.
It's really stupid. But until next week, and that's not 2 weeks, next week we will be back doing Indie Game Life After. But until then, Stacey, where can the folks find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Stacey Shuttles, or on Twitter and all over the web at Nerds Doing Stuff, where I'm a nerd doing stuff. We'll be writing about Long Beach and about a couple of other things, not Scary Farm we just attended.
Oh, that's right. How was that?
Night. It was a lot of fun. They have great mazes, so count on some stuff like that.
And don't they have a laser tag thing? Or like
oh my gosh, they have, yeah, it's like being in Call of Duty Zombies where they jump out at you. It was terrifying.
That sounds
I thought I was gonna die.
Awful.
It was awful.
I wouldn't even shoot people. I would just butt them.
Honestly, I started out shooting people and I was really proud of myself, and then halfway through I just panicked and ran head down, like gun clutched to my chest. It was so bad.
Whatever, I'm done.
I was.
So make sure to follow Nerds Doing Stuff. I write for him sometimes. You allowed me to do a review of The Backstagers, which is a great comic book, and I highly recommend anybody pick that up and check out Nerds Doing Stuff. I was on today's episode of Hot Pepper Gaming. If you missed it, if you don't know what that show is, that's where they feed you a hot pepper and ask you to review a game. I reviewed Ruby Grim Eclipse from our friends at Rooster Teeth. It was a great time. My mouth was only on fire for maybe like 10 minutes total. But yeah, it was a lovely experience. I love hanging out with Vernon and helping those guys out. And I went to high school with the editor, so that's also kind of weird to be like, hey, you only see me through videos these days. But yes, go check out Hot Pepper Gaming. Leave a comment. They haven't ripped me apart yet, but hey, do me a favor. Leave me a positive comment. Also, if you're a fan of next week, we are doing Indie Game Life After. On our sister network AfterBuzz, though, we are doing Crunch Time, which is a new Rooster Teeth series. I highly recommend it. Patrick is going to be leading that one, which is why I bring it up. It'll be his first show that he's actually leading. This is the most excited he's been about a project in quite some time, so please join us. It'll be right after this show, so it's going to be 6 o'clock. No, it's going to be at 8 o'clock. Excuse me. We're gonna be doing this at 6, Crunch Time at 8. Watch it on Rooster Teeth. The first 2 episodes are free. Also, follow me on Twitter at Mark Donica. I have a lot of other things that I will not spend more time talking about. So follow me at Mark Donica, Stacey at Stacey Shuttles, Patrick at Peter the Dees, all of us here at the Popcorn Talk. Leave us comments, subscribe on iTunes and Yahoo. And Yahoo, why not?
Sure.
But also YouTube. Thank you for joining us this week on Video Game Movie Anatomy. We will see you on Steam.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Popcorn Talk Network or its owners or principals.